so our morning will start off with 3 different panel sessions, one focused specifically around youth engagement, another thinking about the implementation of programs, and the other one focused on the evaluation and research side of PYD programs. We'll have lunch, and then we will break into a series of lightning talks and then a much more interactive session focused on roundtable discussions, a gallery walk, and some video viewings with some discussion with those organizations. We'll end our day then with a discussion with USAID. So keeping true to our theme, we will be having several youth contributors with us today. Some of them will be presenters and panelists, but some will actually be just helping us record today through photographs, through social media, through videotaping. They may approach you and ask you some questions, ask for some quotes, so please feel free to engage and share and have this be part of our networking day. In your folder, you also have a survey that is from USAID to really think about where YouthPower is going and providing some insights as to where USAID should be going in thinking about youth development. So over the course of the day, if you can please complete that survey, and in the registration desk area there is both a fishbowl and a basket that you can place those in. Wi-Fi. There's signs here at the front and one in the back, but just so everybody can hear it, it is NAHB guest. There is a login required, so that is yp@nahb.com, and the password is a capital Y, lowercase p, 123. If you want to join us on social media today, it'll be the hashtag YPALM, so the Youth Power Annual Learning Meeting. And 17, bathrooms, just outside the registration desk, right there to the right. Welcome you to pick up materials, so some people are auditory, some people are visual learners. We have materials for you to pick up to read later. We have breakfast in the atrium, so I hope you have welcomed yourself to some breakfast. In the back of the room there is coffee and there is now water, so people who were missing out on the water earlier, it has arrived. You need help. There are folks like us with red staff badges on our name tags, so any one of us could give you a hand. So come seek us out if you need it. And so anyway, I want to welcome up Elizabeth Berard. She is our contracting officer representative for Youth Power. She also comes from the Office of HIV/AIDS in the Global Health Bureau from USAID. So Elizabeth, most welcome. Good morning. How are you all? I think you need a little coffee. It's in the back of the room. So I just want to say welcome to all of you. There are a few of us in the room that were on the design team for Youth Power. And when we designed Youth Power way back in the day, as many of you know, this is what we had in mind, having a wonderful group of practitioners in the room that span across both Youth Power in terms of the IDIQs and go way, way beyond Youth Power in terms of recognizing all of the learning that you all have. So, just hats off to you. Thank you very much for coming this morning. It's great to have you all in the room. I want to just kind of back up a little bit in terms of the original purpose for Youth Power. I think many of you know that the original purpose for Youth Power was to help us really build the evidence base for positive youth development and cross-sectoral programming. And I think that we are doing that. We're not there, but we're doing that. And I think that this annual meeting really gives us an opportunity to come together and share a lot of that learning. So thanks for coming. I do want to do a couple of housekeeping things, first of all. As some of you know, that I am the COR for YouthPower. And for the YouthPower IDIQ holders, I want to do two things and just remind you. The IDIQ holder project directors recently got an email in their mailbox reminding you about indicator reporting. The annual indicating reporting is due to YouthPower Learning, and so you can refer to that email in terms of what that means for those of you that have active task orders. Also a reminder to the IDIQ holders that it is also required to share your final materials with YouthPower Learning. So please do be in contact as your materials are finalized with YouthPower Learning. The idea of YouthPower is that we're not recreating the wheel, that we all have an opportunity to learn what is going on and to actually build on the work of all of you, all of the work that you're doing. Additionally, I would like to invite our non-YouthPower IDIQ holders that are in the room to also share materials because, again, we really do want to learn from the best and the brightest in terms of best practices, in terms of promising approaches, et cetera, et cetera. So please do share. Feel that you can reach out to YouthPower Learning, and they'll certainly be happy to post things on your behalf. And then I guess because you all have learned, or you have all heard from me a number of times, and I know my voice gets a little bit old, I wanted to actually share a few words from our colleague in Macedonia who recently wrote a blog for USAID on the program, on our internal program nets. And her blog was about why we as an agency need to better engage youth. And I was really, I just thought she said it really, really well, and I wanted to channel Lila Jakovlovska into our room here with us this morning because she's really in the field and doing this. And now, of course, it's gone. Okay, so what she has to say is the following. One doesn't need to be a rocket scientist to realize that it is essential to engage with youth more, better, and continually. Despite the problems youth face, young people are at the heart of solutions to the world's greatest challenges. They genuinely bring energy, creativity, passion, endurance, hope, and a fresh look. Educated, employed, and civically engaged youth can drive the economic and democratic prosperity. We therefore have two choices. We can either work with youth to help them become drivers to economic and social prosperity, or neglect youth and let them become a destabilizing force in many countries where we work. And then she ends with, there's so much more to say and to do meaningfully engage youth in the development programming. It has been tested and it works. We need to challenge ourselves to do it often and to gradually build a culture of nothing about youth without youth. So thank you to Leela for sharing her thoughts and visions and her inspiration there. I think that's all I'm going to say, and without further ado, I want to pass the mic over to my colleague, Kate Sambung-Siri, who is our Acting Deputy Assistant Administrator for the Bureau for Democracy, Conflict, and Humanitarian Assistance at USAID. Kate has previously served with in the missions of Ukraine, Afghanistan, and Indonesia, and brings a lot of fantastic experience to the table. Kate is also part of the Senior Champions for Youth and Development at USAID, and as such, she plays an important role in helping to ensure that our senior staff really think strategically about how we can better engage and support youth in our programming. So Kate, thank you so much for being here this morning, and welcome.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here with you all today. This is my first engagement with YouthPower and at the YouthPower annual meeting. I'm new to this role. I've been back in Washington for 2 months, so I'm really delighted to be here with all of you. I thank you for participating. More importantly, I thank you for your continuous commitment and passion on these issues that you exhibit every day. So I mentioned this is my first engagement with YouthPower. It is certainly not my first engagement with youth programming. So my initial engagement coincides with my initial engagement in development, which was about 20 plus years ago as a Peace Corps volunteer in Nepal. And I'll just share a little anecdote of my initial engagement in these issues before I knew the term change agents and all these other things. So I was a water sanitation volunteer working very humbly and very basically with my liberal arts education to just work on basic sanitation techniques, hand washing, using ash, washing upstream, all these things, and just beating my head against the wall, working with the community development volunteers, working with the mayor's office, really trying to get these practices instilled and not really understanding why they weren't taking hold. And I was in the bazaar one day, and there was a woman, an amma, selling just basic food, parota. And I ordered one, and she went to the back and washed her hands and came out. And I said, I have a question for you. Why did you do that? We've been, working on these sanitation. She said, because my daughter told me to. I said, oh, I never thought about that before, engaging through young people. And I know it's a very, very simple insight, one that all of you have had for years and years, but as a 20-year-old working in development for the first time, that was my first insight. That you can engage with young people as change agents, as a vehicle for transmitting really important messages. And that has stuck with me for years throughout my career. But we're not here to talk about my experiences. We're here for you to share yours. And to kick that off, I'm going to do 3 brief things in my message this morning. One is to talk about how we're thinking about youth in this current administration. 2 is to reemphasize this importance of furthering the youth evidence base. And 3rd, just a few reflections in moving forward. So the question on the minds of many of you all in this room, right? Is youth a priority for this administration? I answer that by saying, with 1.8 billion young people in the world, the most at any time, with 90% of those people living in developing countries, with youth at the forefront of every major foreign policy issue, whether it's peace and security, economic development, promoting American values, how can youth not be a priority for this administration? I think we understand that youth is essential to promoting our national security. We understand that educated, healthy, employed, civically engaged youth are the drivers of economic growth, of prosperity, and that you all know better than anyone else, when we fail to engage youth and address their needs, it can lead to violence, instability, unrest, migration. The research is very clear on this. So I emphasize youth remains a priority, not only for the administration, but for our new administrator as well. Many of you all are aware, Administrator Green started his career in development as a teacher in Kenya. He continued to engage on these issues as ambassador in Tanzania. And then as president of the International Republican Institute, he launched Generation Democracy. So we see youth engagement embodied in his career and his work. So, filling that question, youth is a priority, but we also all know that commitment and resources are not enough. And that leads me to topic 2, and engaging with you all on this today, which is furthering the youth evidence base and development. So I think for me personally, and I imagine for many of you all in this room, one of the really rewarding things about engaging with youth is that the energy and passion surrounding the field. Right, as a democracy and governance officer working in Afghanistan, rule of law, the rule of law ambassador and I were often very frustrated working in rule of law because we were always engaging with the judiciary, with members of parliament, with the ministries, and some of these house kind of the most recalcitrant institutions where change seemed really, really difficult. So to seek inspiration when we'd get really beaten down by the day-to-day work, we would go to our programs, visiting the law schools, visiting, working with young people to really remind ourselves to draw inspiration from places where change is really possible and it can be generational. One of my favorite things was the very last thing I did in Afghanistan before I left, actually, was judging a moot court competition with young people who came from all over Afghanistan to compete. And if they won, they would get a place and be able to go to the United States and compete in this competition. It was a big competition, and at the end, a small law school in bulk with a mix of boys and girls won this competition and unseated the big powerhouse Kabul school. And, the girl who was on the team came up and gave me a big hug afterwards and said, "Thank you." And she said, "Now we know it's possible." And I think that's really the spirit in which so many of us are engaged in this issue, is that inspiration, that sense of things are possible. But we also know in this room that alone, the commitment, the passion, isn't enough. And what we really need is a demonstrated body of evidence that our programming actually works, not just these great stories that so many of you all have and so many of us have experienced. So to that end, I'd like to acknowledge YouthPower Learning in leading the efforts to develop and disseminate the latest evidence, the tools, the materials for positive youth development. We know these tools are critical for project design, for implementation. And I cannot overemphasize enough the importance of working together and advancing and sustaining these efforts to address the evidence gap, especially in the key foreign policy areas I mentioned at the beginning, in economic opportunities, especially for young women, in understanding the role of young people in countering violent extremism, to really challenge you to that. So to my last point, moving forward, is exactly that. I challenge all of you all in this room really to consider applying the evidence and tools we've created and to build on one another's network here, to actually improve programming. I know that's what you're gathered here to do today, and I really challenge you to really work very much towards that. You all know that the climate right now in the development community, that we're facing the possibility of serious budget cuts broadly. That's always in the back of our minds. So our rejoinder to that, as we're fighting the budget battles on the Hill and the administration elsewhere, but the other rejoinder to that is that we collectively have to work smarter, work more collaboratively, and we have to demonstrate that what we do works. That means working cross-sectorally, that means working in an integrated way, and promoting youth well-being, education, employment, all of these things. So with that in mind, I challenge you to take that up today, not only to share with each other the inspiring stories and the passion that drives so many of us to this work, but really the hard-nosed evidence of not only what works, but what doesn't, and being really open about that, learning, collaborating, because all of us are in this together, and continuing in the spirit of engaging and doing what's possible. So thank you for your commitment. Thank you for letting me share moments of today with you, and best of luck in your work.
Great. Thank you, Kate, so much for sharing your perspective around what's the challenge that we have, and to think about how we take today's inspiration and the inspiration from each of our work and apply it and continue to build out the evidence base. So this is part of our goal of the day, and thank you for sort of setting that scene for us. So continuing our partnership with USAID, I'd love to welcome Mike McCabe to come up as the moderator of this next panel. Mike is the agency's youth coordinator